Hey, a lot of you guys are having trouble getting interviews, and it's really, really frustrating when you're in that situation, when you're submitting a ton of applications and you're trying to get a job. You're trying really hard, but you just are not getting callbacks by recruiters or companies in general, and you're just kind of flustered. You don't know what's wrong. You think that you're a bad developer or there's something wrong with you, and it really is disheartening. But what the matter of the fact is that you guys need to kind of develop grit and just keep on submitting applications. But we're going to talk about that in a minute. If you guys are not subscribed to our channel, make sure you subscribe down below. This is Isa with Journey to Programming, and let's jump right in. So one of the big things that I hear a lot from friends, colleagues, students, and other people that I meet just kind of in public that find out I'm a software developer and ask me questions is they're having trouble with landing interviews. And it's crazy to me because I remember being in that situation. I remember when I first started out in industry, I could not land an interview for the life of me. And that was very disheartening. I mean, I had software development experience already, but when I got my computer science degree and I moved over from web development as a freelancer to try to get a full-time job, I had a lot of difficulty doing it. And what I ended up doing is almost giving up on trying to be a software developer because of that experience. Luckily, I just kept on applying, and it worked out in the end. And years down the line nowadays, I try to help out everybody I can and help them understand that it is difficult, especially when you're early on in your career or when you're trying to switch kind of between industries and you're trying to maybe change the type of work you do up. It's really difficult to land that first job, that first 2-3 jobs. So you just have to have a lot of grit, a lot of perseverance, and then just kind of shake it off. I mean, when you get denied or when you don't get contacted, you just have to be able to shake it off. So what are the key points that you really need to consider if you're not getting the feedback or the interviews that you really want to be landing? There are a few big things that you guys should be considering. One of them, and the main thing, is what does your resume look like and what does that portfolio look like that you're sending over to recruiters? Most likely you're applying to jobs either through the company job sites, so big companies like Blizzard, Google, Facebook, all these huge companies out there have their own job portal, right? So you're probably applying directly on them, and that's perfectly fine. But what is it that you're actually putting in the information you're submitting to them? That's number one. You need to be thinking about that, because if you have had no success, then there's probably a problem with the way your portfolio's selling to them. Next, you could be applying through job board sites like Indeed or Monster or Simply Hired or Glassdoor. If you're failing to land interviews after submitting hundreds of resumes or dozens, however many it is, and you're failing to get even a callback by a recruiter just to say, hey, we have this role, we really think you'd be a good candidate, even though we don't really know what this role means, but you applied and we want to give you a shot. If you're not getting at least that call, then you really need to consider these application materials that I'm talking about, okay? You need to think about, what is your resume portraying? Are you being detailed enough in your resume, in the skill and displaying the skills that you know well enough for people to understand? Are you doing it too much? Most of the time I see that people are vague. People are a little bit too vague in describing what they did in their prior jobs, in their education, on their hobby projects, and that really does negatively affect their chances in landing an interview. And I'll be honest, when I'm looking at resumes and looking to hire somebody, I don't want somebody to be vague in the way they describe their experience. I want them to be direct. I want them to be concise. I want them to be clear. I want them to say, hey, I was a web developer on this project using this technology stack. I took ownership of XYZ features. Maybe you did the whole end-to-end development. Maybe you did all the front end and all the back end development. So you created any front end code and maybe some kind of Java framework. Maybe you're using Angular or something. Then you also developed a back end. And maybe you did that in just a traditional PHP back end framework or something like that, like Laravel. So I would love to know the tech stacks you use, because it's important to me, especially if I'm looking to hire you. If you're a game developer looking to work for me as an interactive Unity developer, I want to know that you've worked in Unity. I want to know that you've been developing mechanics. I want to know if you've been developing tools, plugins, how you've been developing them. Are you doing it in C#? If you don't tell me you're doing it in C#, I don't know if you actually know how to code. Maybe you're copy and pasting. Maybe you're using JavaScript, which you shouldn't be if you're doing Unity. Most people are all in C#. But in either case, describe what you're using. If you're using plugins within Unity, if you're buying third-party plugins from the asset store and there's some big name ones that you're using, mention them. It's not going to hurt you. If you're integrating with some web APIs, tell me how you're using the web APIs. Tell me if you're the one writing the requests. If you are helping in debugging, it'd be great to know how you do the debugging. Are you getting tasks and issues allocated to you on Jira, and then you're going through the bug list and just kind of putting out fires? If that's what you're doing, it's good to know. Don't just tell me that, oh, I was hired to be a Unity developer on a game development team. I don't know what that means. I mean, okay, I can guess. I've been doing this long enough, but it doesn't describe your role well enough or your technical abilities. So that is a big problem I see in a lot of developer resumes. People are shy about tooting their own horn. I agree. You shouldn't be kind of going out there and lying on your resume and saying that you know how to do everything in the world and you're an expert at C++, C#, JavaScript, Python. No, but you're probably capable of moving between languages. So don't add too much fluff to everything, but don't also be too shy. I mean, be humble with the way you describe yourself, but also be confident. So you have to have a confident resume. You have to also put those technical capabilities in them. All right. What are some of the other big things you need to consider in your resume? Let's see. I don't usually care too much for beginners or people changing industries if you put irrelevant information, like say you worked at a restaurant for a little while during college. I don't mind if you do that. If you worked at a restaurant for a little while and that's the only professional experience you have, but you also list any projects you've done on the side, then I'm going to at least see that you've worked with other people, you've had a job before. That means you probably have some social skills. I may give you a shot. If you are in another industry, put some of that work in there. You don't have to put everything. Don't make it run over 4 or 5 pages. Give me like 2 pages, not a big deal, okay? Don't be shy about it. Again, you need to be able to sell yourself. Don't lie. Don't add a ton of fluff and BS your entire resume, cover letter, or portfolio, but be confident. Sell yourself. Think about who's going to see your resume first. If you're applying to a larger company, it's likely that you're going to be getting your resume in front of a recruiter that is not very technical. The way they're going to judge your resume is on what you sell yourself as, how you sell yourself. They're going to take a look at the keywords that they can relate to a job requisition or the specific department they're hiring for. And if you have the technical terms and the knowledge in there and you're able to speak well enough about it, then they're probably going to give you a shot. So why not do it that way? Think about it that way. Smaller companies, that's a different ballgame. In smaller companies, you tend to have resumes being reviewed by sometimes the engineering team, sometimes it's a hiring manager, sometimes it's a recruiter from a completely different company that's a vendor that just does recruitment. Sometimes it's a CEO that reviews your resume or the CTO. So that's really a mixed bag, but that just means you need to be able to sell yourself even more. Again, don't BS yourself. Don't BS other people, but be confident and tell people what you've done and what you're capable of. That's the most important thing. Now, on top of your resume, you guys may have heard my dog snoring in the background. I'll show you guys in sometime. His name's Darth Vader. Anyways, so jumping right back into this, another thing that I see that people do not feel confident enough to add into their resumes is some sort of portfolio. If you're making open source contributions and you're miles ahead of a lot of people, so you should not be shy about posting your Git repositories or your Git handle. If you're using GitHub, GitLab, Bitbucket, whichever one it is, if you have public commits available and logs on there that people can see, make them something you emphasize in your resume. Put it in the top corner next to your name on the resume. Put it in the middle somewhere where it's clear that people can go to that URL, find your handle, and then take a look at what you've done. I always had a little bit of a hard time with this because most of the projects I've worked on are commercial products or they're intellectual property that can't be shared. So there are cases where you can't do too much, but if you're looking to get a job in the industry and you're a fresher or you're green to the industry, you're brand new, you really should be putting a lot of your projects in a repository and just make them public. No one's going to steal your ideas. If they're great ideas, you're probably already looking at investment opportunities anyways, so you shouldn't be worried about it. And in those cases, you're not going to share it publicly, obviously, but don't be afraid of sharing your source code. If you are new to the industry, it's a good thing to do. Show that you've been learning how to do algorithms and data structures. Add data structure implementations that you've done. It shows that you're practicing. It shows how you write code. It does help. And it shows that, hey, you know how to use Git. If you don't know what Git is, I'm going to put a link down below. Take a look at it. Git is one of the most standard source code repository systems out there. Other people use Perforce, SVN. I think they're all very similar. Once you get the hang of one, it makes sense. Git is very common. If you're not used to using Git, learn it now, especially if you're new to the industry or moving into the industry. It's important. The major companies maybe won't give you too big of an issue if you need to learn it on the job, because they probably have their own maybe proprietary source code system anyways, version control systems. But in any case, knowing how to work with Git is very important. It will save you a lot of from a lot of problems in the future if you're working on your own projects and they start getting big enough that you want to have version control there. Okay? Just trust me. Do it. So now, next thing, share your source code. Set up a website for yourself as well. Okay? I am a firm believer that everybody should know how to get some sort of server, whether it's shared hosting or cloud hosting, and then put up your own website. Now, if you feel as though you don't want to give those things a shot, a lot of people don't like the idea of having to get hosting their own server or finding hosting and then getting a domain and then putting up some sort of website or installing one. That's just kind of over their heads. I learned it kind of at a young age. Again, I began freelancing in web development pretty early on, so I figured it out, and it's something which has been handy to me. I think everybody in software development should have their own website in some format. It could be a hobby site, it could be a blog, it could be a consulting site, it could be a business site. Either way, you should know how to get a website spun up. You should know how to get a server spun up. If you don't want to go through that hassle, take a look at the ready-to-go websites out there. Websites like Wix, like WordPress, Weebly, SquareSpace, the websites that let you just purchase a website and then it's a WYSIWYG editor. It's a drag-and-drop type editor where you go and just enter the information you want and you're all happy and it just builds the whole website for you magically. If that's what you want to do, do it. It's going to help get a profile online, set up your own website. It will help you. Trust me. And if you want to give it a shot, if you want to give wrapping your own server up and spinning one up, getting your own hosting a shot, then definitely try. There's a ton of resources out there, and it's cheap to do. You can go with an AWS micro-size server for free using their free tier, and that's an option to learn. You can go with Google Cloud Services, right? The other option, if you don't want to go the cloud way, which Google Cloud Services, AWS, DigitalOcean, those are all cloud servers. You can go with a shared hosting server, right? That's going to be much more simplified, like GoDaddy, like Ipage, or HostMonster, and they're usually pretty cheap. I have been using shared hosting and cloud server hosting for probably about 10 years. My shared servers are cheap, okay? I originally got a contract to buy it with a domain and 5 years of hosting for under $100, okay? That's 5 years. and I control that entire server to an extent. That's a shared hosting server. There is limited control, but I control the content on it. I control the installations, and I installed, at first I developed my own websites, blah, blah, blah. Great. If you're a web developer, develop your own websites. If you're going to be a web developer, you should make your own. You should also know how to set up a server and configure it and load up your web stack and make sure everything's running. But if you're not going to be focusing on web development like me, I just turned it into a WordPress. I installed WordPress on my server, and that just saves me a ton of effort. So again, all I'm trying to say is if you don't have a website yet, get one. Set up a free one with like Weebly or Wix or WordPress if they have them, or pay for the cheap version of them. Set up your website, get your portfolio on it, write a little short, record a video, take a picture, make yourself personable and seem like you're a nice person. I'm sure you are. And that will help you put your resume on there, put your prior work, and then put any links to your Git repositories or examples of work you've done on there, okay? Next, if you do not have a LinkedIn portfolio in 2019, I don't know what to say. If you're a student, okay, fair enough. If you are already working, you know what LinkedIn is. Make a profile. Make a profile, and when you're having a hard time trying to find gigs and land at least a call from a recruiter, begin adding recruiters and other people from the companies you're interested in trying to interview with, and then maybe try to schmooze with them a little bit. Send them a message on LinkedIn after you've added them, and maybe ask about what it's like to work at their company. Tell them you're interested in it. Maybe add somebody from your favorite company. Be like, hey, XYZ or so-and-so, I was really interested in working for your guys' company, and I was hoping to add you and become a connection on LinkedIn. And if you don't mind me asking a few questions, I was curious about if you have any recommendations on how to set up my resume and develop the skills that would maybe land me a job there in the future. Most people are going to look at that, be flattered that you reached out to them, and then they're going to give you a tip or two. So that's one way. If you're stuck, get outside of the box, which is submitting resumes and cover letters and expecting people to call you back, and just reach out to people. It hurts. It's difficult to do sometimes, but just do it. You're going to be fine. And lastly, if all else fails, you should be doing this anyways. You should really be A/B testing your application materials, okay? If you don't know what A/B testing is, it is basically using two versions or forms of a website, your resume or cover letter materials. And what you're going to do is you're going to submit them to people throughout your application process and see which ones are getting the most interest. If people are responding to the B version instead of the A version of your resume and application materials, then maybe the material you have on that second resume, maybe you made it more detailed, maybe you made it, you wrote it in a more confident way. Maybe that's the one you want to start using as your primary application materials, or for your primary application materials, and maybe you want to reshape your resume to be more like that. Okay, it's just a strategy. It's something that we do commonly in industry. So if you're developing web applications, mobile applications, marketing materials, you will A/B test multiple designs to see what sticks, what people like, what people don't like, what develops the most interest in click-through rates, etc. Again, I just want to help you guys out. So if any of you guys have any questions, feel free to send a message to us. Our email is usually posted right down below in the description right down there. And if you haven't subscribed yet, we would really appreciate it. Subscribe down below. It should be right over here. So a little below my mic. Again, as always, if you guys have any comments or questions, leave them down below. If you want us to review your resume, check out our email down below and send it on to us. Have a good one, guys.